Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. Glenn, I'm having trouble with the remote. If you could advance the slide, I'd appreciate it.
Oh. See, it's frozen on my end.
John, we're having trouble advancing it.
Okay, and so am I. So let me see what I can do here. Try one more thing.
See, we're not getting the tool.
Yeah.
Apologize to the attendees for this delay, but we are stuck.
John, can you try your arrow keys, please?
Nothing's advancing the slides, Rich.
Try yours again,
Yeah.
Margaret.
That's fine. See, I just get what he said.
Yeah.
Glenn, I just gave it back to you. Would you try again, please?
Yes.
Now, try one more time.
Now we got it.
Thank you
Now
very much.
we have control.
I appreciate everybody's patience. And Glenn, I'm going to ask you just go to the next slide as I talk.
Okay.
Today we have a group with us from Georgia, and I'll be talking a little bit more about them in just a moment. But I'd like to just address the attendees. In case you have technical difficulties like we were just having, we have this phone number for you. If you take a moment to jot it down, and while you're at it, jot down 309-801-098, which is the webinar ID number. You'll need that if you call for support during the broadcast. Next slide, please. NASSP is hopeful that you are helping us spread the word by tweeting about the webinars and other activities of NASSP, and hashtag NASSP is the usual Twitter handle, but in this case of a webinar, add the word webinar to it. So hashtag NASSP webinar. Of course, we're on Facebook, and the website, which is a crucial part of today's presentation, is listed for you. You can get a recording of this broadcast as well as the slides at www.nassp.org/webinar in about 24 hours. And last but not least, on the housekeeping end of things, if you are a person who needs or wants a certificate of attendance, you get that at the same place, nassp.org/webinar, and add the word completed, and that'll take you directly to the certificate of attendance. Next slide, please. So I said I'd get back to bringing our guests to your attention, and here they are. I won't go through each person's name and position, but all the presenters you see in front of you will be taking part in today's discussion. And with that, I'll turn the webinar over to Glenn Pethel, who leads the group. Glenn?
Thank you, John. Good afternoon. So everyone will be participating that you saw, with the exception of Steve Flynn. Steve is on a flight this afternoon and is sorry that he's not able to be with us. So we're very pleased that you are joining us this afternoon, and we certainly want to start by encouraging questioning along the way. And we'll not only give you that opportunity during the webinar, but also leave some time at the end, hopefully for questions and answers. So this notion of putting a puzzle together, and most of us who from the earliest attempts in childhood with simple puzzles to now as an adult, as we think about some very complex puzzles and problems that we put together, I think is a very appropriate graphic. When we talk about this notion of evaluating and supporting new principals, I know that the successful onboarding of new principals is a value proposition. It simply makes good business sense to slow the loss of principals. In the 2014 report published by School Leaders Network, generally known by the simple name of Churn, the authors reported that 25,000 principals leave their schools every year. Further, 50% of new principals quit during their third year in the role. In this webinar, we propose to answer some essential questions on how to reduce these disturbing trends. As much as anyone in public education, it is the principal who is in the position to ensure that good teaching and learning spreads beyond the single classroom, and that ineffective practices aren't simply allowed to fester. We attribute this quote to the Wallace Foundation and the work that they've been involved with over the past 7 years, and even for a longer period beyond the work on the Principal Pipeline Initiative. Stop for just a moment and ask yourself, does this quote resonate with you? What impact does this quote or this statement have on your work? Have you seen leaders who were ineffective but may not have known how they were ineffective or why they were ineffective? And if that is the case, how can a district help these leaders? So we pose some essential questions for today's webinar. But before we state these, we start with this quote. Getting the right people to become school leaders is very important, but so is providing these people with the right set of skills to be effective leaders. In other words, how do you use effective strategies to ensure that we do not throw new leaders into the deep end of the pool without adequate continued support? Margaret, help us with that.
We agree with the quote and want to reinforce that providing the right people with the right set of skills is essential to school and school district success. So our essential questions for today are, 1, how can a district create a community of practice to evaluate and support new principals? 2, what tools or strategies can be used to build the capacity of new principals? That leads us to some foundational elements that Glenn will share with us at this time.
So every solid building, every solid structure that we know about starts with a foundation. And that's true for this work as well. The problem for policymakers is that as they consider how to build a system that ensures high quality leadership in every school, is finding the policy and the regulatory leverage point that states can use to drive leadership behavior more precisely. This from the National Association of School Boards and of Education, of State Boards of Education. So I want you to consider this statement. Does it resonate with you? In other words, are there policies, are there regulatory leverage points that we have control over? Are there policies, procedures, or other leverage points in your district that you have control over? If you're in a state agency, the same question. Clearly, we believe that there are foundational blocks that must be found in districts that reinforce the value and the prioritization of principal support. And I'm going to ask Clay to elaborate on that point.
So Glenn, much like any sound structure, the beginning point in evaluating and supporting your principals begins with a solid foundation. These foundational elements include a board of education and CEO superintendent that's engaged and supports the work through policies, priorities, and initiatives. There must be a framework for school improvement and theories of action and communities of practice. And so, Glenn, I'm sure you would agree that these elements have been a cornerstone of our success in Gwinnet County Public Schools.
I do agree, Clay. So let's look specifically at some of the strategies and tools. So the answer to that first essential question about creating a community of practice starts at the top. As Clay said, it means having those foundational elements in place. And assuming that you build that solid foundation that Clay described, are there more specific strategies and tools that are specific to the support of new principals? We believe there are. Margaret?
Sure. Some of the strategies and tools that we have found to be the most beneficial are measurement and monitoring, focusing on results or desired results, calibration of supervision and evaluation, and the connections with coaching and mentoring. At this time, Peggy and Clay will now describe and show some of the tools that have worked for them and for our district.
Thank you, Margaret. One of our fundamental tools for supporting and evaluating principals in Gwinnett County is our Gwinnett Leadership Effectiveness System. It is our evaluation tool, but it also serves to communicate what leaders need to know and be able to do from the very beginning of the principalship. You are seeing the rubric for the Instructional Leadership Standard, and you can see that there are 4 levels to this skill set. The GLES, or the Gwinnett Leadership Effectiveness System, is our common set of expectations for Gwinnett leaders, and it focuses on the pivotal practices and skill sets needed to be an effective principal and leader, which of course should result in maximizing learning for all students, which is our bottom line. We believe that it is important for principals to know these expectations from the very beginning, because of course they will have a much greater chance of achieving success if they know what their target is. We begin this process by having the principal self-assess their skill set using a similar rubric in 8 leadership standards. And then we, the principal and the principal supervisor, we work together in a pre-conference discussing the principal's self-assessment of his or her strengths and areas for growth and how to build on each. If there are areas where the principal can lead others, we empower them to lead. If there are areas where the principal needs to learn more, we find ways to support them in their learning. And our goal is for the principal and the principal supervisor to walk out of that pre-conference knowing what effectiveness will look like throughout the year. And we all know that there are a lot of words in this slide, and so this slide deck will be available after the webinar, and if you would like to contact us, we are happy to share our resources with you as well. So Clay, will you now talk to us about our support and coaching timeline?
Thank you, Peggy. One key to success for principals is having the right school improvement processes in place. This timeline doesn't just provide guidance for when we as principal supervisors do our work with principals. It also serves as a guide for principals for how to go about doing their own work. The inputs, goals, and topics represent those things we've learned as a school improvement team are necessary for school success. For example, the Local School Plan for Improvement, LSPI, is developed by the principal and leaders from the faculty and staff. This is where that team, establish the goals and the plan for implementing those goals based on a needs assessment that team conducts at the end of the school year. So we're watching the creation of that LSPI and the use of the needs assessment with an idea behind us being able to then hold the principal accountable for its execution, but along the way, they are learning how to do the work. The 45-day review that you also see on this timeline is an opportunity for us to model for the principal how to constantly check on progress toward the goals that have been established in the Local School Plan for Improvement. And then finally, the principal supervisor paired observations that you also see on the timeline are not just for principal supervisors to calibrate, but also it is a model for the principals on the importance of their own calibration in order to improve the evaluations of teachers in their schools. So Peggy, I'm going to swing it back over to you to talk more about the local school plan for improvement.
Thank you, Clay. Another tool that we use to support and build the capacity of new principals is our LSPI instructional observation instrument. And you see a partial sample on the screen. And just like your district, in our district, we have multiple principal supervisors, and our team of principal supervisors are working together to be consistent in our practices and reduce the variability as we visit schools. And we know that this is vitally important so that each child in our district has access to high quality instruction of the curriculum regardless of the school they attend. And one way we do that is through this instrument. Sometimes we may begin this process by modeling and coaching for principals on how to use this tool. But our ultimate goal is for the principal and the assistant principals to be able to effectively monitor the quality of instruction in their schools, either using this tool or a similar tool. But this tool does help us focus on the instructional core components of a lesson: the teacher focus, the student focus, and the content focus. And as we walk through classrooms, principals and assistant principals reflect upon and answer the questions that you see based on evidence from this observation. As you all know, a principal being able to evaluate and monitor the instruction in his or her school, as well as lead it with his or her assistant principals, is a vitally important skill set, and our team is committed in helping principals become more effective in this area. Now, equally important is the reflection, the debrief, and the follow-through after the observation occurs. And the principal supervisors, our team, sometimes we act as thinking partners. Sometimes we act as coaches, and sometimes we act as evaluators. And some questions that we ask are, what insights were gained during your classroom observation and review of the student work? What will be your next steps as the instructional leader of your school, and what will be your time frame for completion of these next steps? We may ask also what actions are needed for specific teachers, grade levels, or content areas, and again, what time frame will be used to address these issues. Our next step is vitally important too. We then follow up and follow through on our next visit to see the implementation of these next steps. So Clay is going to now talk to us about our logic model for this work.
We truly believe that our principals are district leaders. With this in mind, we have to make sure that principals see the link between their work at the local school and the district's mission, vision, beliefs, initiatives, and priorities. The assistant superintendent schema reminds us all of the connections between our school's work and the work of the district. For example, our district's theory of action, which you see on the schema, informs our decisions around the number of scheduled visits. As principal supervisors, we know that how a school performs on what we call the weighted school assessment, which is a component of our results-based evaluation system, or RBS, will impact the level of monitoring and the focus of our meetings throughout the year. So this logic model reminds us that of our vision, which is to become a system of world-class schools. And we are constantly working with principals to make sure that our focus is on student achievement. And by using the inputs, outputs, and objectives that are part of this logic model, we can all stay on task and focused on that ultimate goal. So I'm going to pass the baton to Margaret to talk about the importance of coaching and mentoring.
Okay. From the same Leaders Network report that Glenn mentioned earlier in the webinar, we learned that principals report their capacity develops most when they are engaged in mentoring, coaching, and peer-to-peer learning. So our district has hired retired principals and assistant principals to support these new leaders in an effort to train and retain high-performing building leaders. Leader mentors are chosen based on prior success as a leader in our district and join this team by invitation, not applying. We work with the principal supervisors to support the academic success of our schools, our students, and our new leaders. Leader mentors share notes from our coaching sessions and meet frequently with the principal supervisor of the school so that we can ensure wraparound support for these leaders. We do this so that we can offer consistency in our message and focus of our work. This is accomplished through strategies such as paired observations and observing common planning together as a team. We very much believe in the power of being a partner with the leader mentor and the assistant superintendent to benefit the school. At this time, I'm going to refer back to Glenn for final comments and questions.
So it's been our pleasure this afternoon to share some of the tools and strategies, share some of the information that we believe is very important in terms of those foundational elements that we believe are critical and can lead to success in the evaluation and the support that we give to our new principals. This afternoon, I've heard my colleagues use the word modeling more than once. So I want to hear from Clay and Peggy particularly. Why is modeling, as we think about our new principals, why is modeling important for them?
Glenn, I want to go back to our vision. Our district's vision is focused on the idea that we are to become a system of world-class schools, which is very different than being a world-class school system. So at the district office, we could have all the answers in the world. We can know what's right and what needs to be done. But until that's transferred over to the principal, and that principal takes ownership of that right work, we aren't where we need to be. So modeling is that bridge. It's the tool that we use to get our principals to the point where they own the work and we begin to see it played out in classrooms with students and teachers across the district.
All right, thanks.
So, Clay, you're exactly right. And modeling is just providing an example, a model, a demonstration for principals on how to do this work. We begin by, having a pre-conference before we even do our very first observation in the office and talk about what that observation is going to look like. And then we always want to put the principal in the leader role of that observation. And so we may talk about what questions will you ask your assistant principals? What tools will we look at to see if the student work is aligned to the curriculum at the appropriate level? We may even model for them how to take a common assessment with them as they walk through classrooms to make sure that the work that students are doing will help them get to the level of the assessment at the end. So we show them how to use the tools, but we always want the leader, the principal, to be the one leading that work with the APs and the assistant principals. And then, but we let the principal know, we are going to release you and we want you to be able to lead this work in the schools when we come, even when we're not there. We want this to be a daily practice with your assistant principals. And we even release it to the assistant principals and say, hey, you take us through math today with our instructional walk and start building that skill set with our assistant principals as well. We not only model through the walkthroughs, but we also model in collaborative planning. If a school is not effective in their collaborative planning structures, we sometimes have district support come in and show them how to have an effective collaborative planning, or we send them to schools that they can see an accurate and effective model. We also model for them leadership meetings. effective leadership meetings that focuses on instruction as their number one priority. Yes, we have to make sure that all of the operational pieces and the management pieces are in our schools so that instruction can happen, but we help our new principals and all of our principals focus on that instructional piece in their leadership meetings. So modeling takes place in every practice and every skill set for those performance standards for a principal.
Thank you, Peggy and Clay, for such clarity in responding to that question about modeling. I think all of us aspire to be a great model, maybe even to be an exemplary model for others. And for those who are new to the principalship, we believe very strongly that having those exemplary models in place is a key to their future success.
Glenn,
yes.
a question has just popped up from somebody in the audience. Do you have a coaching component for your principals as part of your program?
Do, absolutely. So the coaching comes both through the supervisors. In fact, Peggy mentioned earlier in the webinar that there is a connection between evaluation and coaching. And as principal supervisors, they attempt to achieve that balance. But our leader mentors also bring in that coaching component. And I don't want to speak for my colleagues here, but one of the, I think, beautiful balance of work that I see here on a daily basis is how those like Peggy and Clay who evaluate and those who coach like Margaret align their work and collaborate on their work. Again, it's finding that balance between when something is evaluative in nature and when something is of coaching nature, but they work together on that.
And that's a primary focus for the leader mentors. Is we've worked really hard over the past, it's probably the last 5 years especially, in really perfecting our ability to coach as opposed to mentor, because in the coaching and in the modeling, we're building up resiliency for those leaders to be successful long after we're in their buildings, that week after week. So it's a very much a part of what we do, and it's part of our culture that we do work openly and honestly with our principal supervisors so that we can provide effective feedback and effective support for our schools.
Another question that's come in from the audience is, do you conduct a mid-year conference for your new principals? And if so, what does that look like?
And let me start by saying, yeah, it's more than a mid-year. Yes. So Peggy or Clay, talk about those multiple steps, especially in the first couple of years in the life of a new principal.
So these observations are can be as often as twice a month, if not more. And remember, our focus is on implementation of that plan for improvement. We know that success comes when principals are effectively implementing that plan. So we're in the classrooms to see if the plan is being carried out with teachers and students. But we're also looking at data, and that is happening every 45, 90, and 135 days. We are sitting with principals. We are reviewing the goals that they've established. We're reviewing the data, and all of that information is being collected by the principal supervisor and is being used for that evaluation in the Gwinnett Leader Effectiveness System. And so there are constant updates with the principal. Where we sit with them. Yes, mid-year would be one of those points where we are sitting with them and we are going over progress toward full implementation of that plan for improvement, and even more importantly, achievement of the goals that they've set.
Well, I see that we're at about 1 minute till the end of this webinar, so just want to offer to the panel, is there anybody who has any last words for the audience?
Just a reminder, John, two things. One, a reminder that this slide deck will be available through the NASSP website. And then secondly, if there's anyone who wants specific information about any aspect of our supervision, any of the work that we do with new principals, with leader mentoring, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Glenn, Glenn _ Pethel, P-E-T-H-E-L, at Gwinnett, that's G-W-I-N-N-E-T-T, K12.ga.us, and we'd be more than happy to share information with you. Again, we appreciate everyone's time and commitment to the work toward evaluating and supporting new principals.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you to the panel. I really appreciate your time. It's been a productive afternoon. And I'd like to say to our audience that if you haven't been to an NASSP Principals Conference, you really ought to treat yourself and go this July. It's in Boston, Massachusetts, July 18th through 20th. And you can register by going to www.principalsconference.org. That's www.principalsconference.org. And we hope you'll join us again for another webinar.